If you haven't led through a disruption yet, you will. Our guest today has, and he's here to help us think about how to lead through disruption. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, and human potential with experts from every walk of life. Your host is Kevin Eikenberry, a best-selling author and leadership thought leader for 25 years. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's book, The Long Distance Leader: Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. Order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/book. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. My guest today is Tony Hunter. And as you may have heard me say in the past, sometimes we have leadership experts, and sometimes we have expert leaders. Today, we have the latter. Installed as CEO and publisher of the Chicago Tribune in 2008, Tony set about reshaping and expanding the group's offerings across all digital platforms while optimizing the performance of the legacy print business. The massive disruptions that occurred in the publishing industry during his tenure galvanized his approach to leadership and innovation. Critical to his success was his creation of a fearless team culture where all members were inspired and empowered to embrace the new. His leadership team was able to develop industry-leading strategies during this period, along with greater employee engagement and best-in-class operational and financial results. He is a non-practicing CPA. He earned his BA from Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in case you're wondering, and his MBA from DePaul. He is a lifelong Chicago resident, but he now resides in, well, at least today, he's in Boca Raton, Florida. He is a former chair of News Media Alliance, the chair emeritus of Metropolitan Family Services, and a United Way board member. Tony, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Nice to be on.
Hey, we've already been chatting for like 10 minutes, and we've determined that we have lots in common. We're about the same age, which means that some might call us old, but we wouldn't call ourselves old.
Young.
But I'm excited to have you here, Tony, and to talk a little bit about your experience. You told me already before I hit record that you're kind of a nonconformist, and the way I've introduced you says a little bit about your journey. But tell us, how do you go from South Side of Chicago to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to leading the Tribune? Tell us a little bit about the journey.
Sure, Kevin. Well, it's all around people. I've been blessed. First of all, my parents pushed me hard to be the first college grad and to make sure that I could afford my family what they needed. And they were factory workers. And I start there because it all starts there. They had the courage to leave the South and come to Chicago by themselves, knowing no one, and work for 38 and 35 years in the glass factory. My dad 38, my mom 35, different shifts, and really worked hard to give my brothers and I a stable home and the wherewithal to go to college. And so I start there because talk about risk-taking. Early in my life, I've had a great example of risk-taking, and they also pushed me hard to believe I could do whatever I wanted if I worked hard enough. So I really was blessed to have a great inner circle also of friends who pushed me. And then as I go through my career, it's really great bosses. Well, first of all, a great wife who I've been married to for 33 years.
Yeah, let's start there, right?
Who supported me the whole journey, still supports me in my new endeavors, but started there, had great bosses. As I joined the workforce, I also got into a company that wanted to revise the way they did audits. I was a CPA, so I got the opportunity to lead that. I was put in some tough situations as a young manager, which is, as we talk, the School of Hard Knocks.
Yep.
Where I have many degrees from that, and then was blessed to go to the best media company in the world back then, Tribune Company. And for 23 years was surrounded with great people, bosses that believed in me, and mentors that really paved the way for me to be prepared to take on more responsibility. And then, of course, great teams and talented colleagues, because clearly, as a leader, you are responsible for really nothing day to day, but accountable for everything in your organization. And so I learned early, surround yourself with really good people and have everyone lift up because of that talented team you have. So a lot around people. Circumstances, of course, opportunities presented themselves, and I was in the right place and prepared, but really around people. That's my journey. It's about people.
There you go. I mean, you said something a second ago. It reminded me of something that I've told people often. That is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So thanks for sharing about that. Now, when you were pitched to us to be on the show, what struck me immediately was Tribune Company, leading that organization, an industry that was then and still is being disrupted. So talk about leading in that kind of turbulent environment when everything around you is shifting and changing. Talk about sort of lessons from that.
Well, Kevin, my timing, if I was going to go to the School of Disruption, was perfect. I was offered the job in September of 2008.
So, we sort of might remember what happened in the world.
Yeah, right? It's hard to believe it's a decade ago, right? Yeah. That the financial collapse, the beginning of the Great Recession, social media exploded during that period of time. And Tribune Company filed for bankruptcy in December of 2008. So my timing was perfect, Kevin.
Welcome to being the CEO. Now we're going bankrupt, right?
First time CEO. And so clearly everybody then looks to you, well, what are you going to do? And I think the first thing I would say about disruption is I thought slowing down to speed up was the best plan, right? Things are moving so fast. There's so many things to address. A lot of people just get started with action. And I decided to pause and engage my team. Well, first of all, I had to get the right team. So I put together a talented, diverse team, and I picked people that had multi-discipline experience because I found we were siloed and everybody was all about themselves. And I wanted people that understood the implications across all departments. So I promoted from within and put together a senior team. And what we did then is engage the top 40 people in the company. And we really set everyone around the context, the challenges, and created a strategic plan, taking 60 to 90 days while Rome's burning, as they say.
Yeah.
And really, I think that, as I look back, was one of the best decisions I made, was to slow down, have the team own the plan, and then get started with action, where everyone knew where we were headed. And then the ability to communicate that to all the employees, rather than what I sometimes see as one-offs. Like, we're going to do this today, tomorrow we're going to do this. And so leading in disruption in my mind is making sure everybody understands the context. Everybody understands the risk of doing nothing, which a lot of people don't want to talk about, but doing that. And then, hey, if we go this direction, we have a good chance of not only surviving, but we could thrive in this environment. So I think that's sort of, when I think back now, I have the luxury of hindsight. I did a lot wrong, we'll talk about some of those, but I think that was a critical learning for me, was it's okay to slow down because you'll get further faster, but it's hard with all the pressure.
Right. So that's, I mean, there's like 3 or 4 things I'd like to unpack from what you just said. And that's the first one, right? I've talked to 100 people about the idea of slowing down to go faster, and everyone will nod their head. Yeah, that makes sense. But in the moment, it's extraordinarily hard. And I'm sure that you had pressures both inside and outside when that's the approach that you took. So did you have were people saying, what, are you crazy? We got to decide. And if so, how did you respond to that urging?
Well, a couple of things. I was fortunate that the folks that promoted me into the job had a high degree of confidence in me. They vetted me well. They watched me in my prior role. They knew I was a change agent. Mm-hmm. So they weren't fearful that I wasn't going to change the organization or take a different direction. So that helped. But of course, as you know, every week revenue numbers come out, every period they close. And so the pressure around results started to pick up. And then, of course, when we filed for bankruptcy, that brought out a whole set of challenges.
I can't even imagine those challenges, actually.
But again, I'm an optimist. So, to me, I had a burning platform too. So I had the good circumstances of a highly committed, passionate team who believed in the mission of a publishing company. And I had a burning platform. And my job, right, was not screw that up, right? Take advantage of both. And a lot of what we do as bosses is keep the noise away from your team.
So they can work, right? Absolutely. There's another thing that you said that I want to highlight, that I want to highlight for people. There have been lots of times in workshops where I ask people, like, what are the biggest mistakes that new leaders make? And new being brand new, but in this case, new to the job, right? And one of the biggest mistakes that they make is that people say, I've had this happen, is that leaders make change too fast or they don't make it at all, right? And so I think it's super important what you described is, even though there's all sorts of pressure and real reasons to make change, that to slow down enough to say, let's make sure that we've got this, right? And that we've got the right plan. And then you said something super important, have a plan that they own. Because if it's your plan as the new boss, even though they know you from inside the organization, man, it doesn't matter if it's the perfect plan. If they don't own it, it ain't going to go very far, right? So I think that there's several things in what you just said that I wanted to just sort of tease out for people that apply, and you don't have to be the CEO for those things to apply to you, right? So it's great for those of you listening that we have someone with the experience as a CEO with the kind of things Tony's talking about. But I don't want you to just listen and say, oh, that's interesting. I want you to listen and think about, how does that apply to me? Even though I'm not in that spot, I'm a leader somewhere in the middle.
I agree with that, Kevin. Well said. I'd like to talk a little about that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
When you become a manager of a department, you have this manager title, and you start to think about what that means. And I just encourage people to always think about being a leader of a department, because you're really trying to bring out the best in your folks. So whether you're in planning, which is where I started at the Chicago Tribune, or you're in the C-suite, I think the ability to get your people to buy in, provide input, and give them the latitude of how they achieve their goals is irrespective of your position. I think those are really key leadership skills that everybody can practice, because I'm sure you agree, 90% of everything you do is planning and preparation. Execution should be this much, but to do that, you have to have rigor and discipline of applying these principles when there's so many external forces that want you to do it the old way, or the way everyone else has done it.
Or the way we did it where I came from.
Exactly.
Or the way we do it in finance.
Exactly. Right. So, I think, this notion of being able to be yourself, authentic, have your own fingerprints, really applies whether you're a manager of two, or you're running a department, or you're running the company. The principles are the same. They're more difficult to execute, of course.
The complexity gets greater, but the principles, yes. And if we were, we're of the same mind here. If we are aware of the principles, if we understand the principles, if we're solid in the principles, we're going to be fine. And, if for all of you listening, if you go back to, I asked Tony to talk about his journey. And the first thing he said was, it's about people. So just having that mindset that says, this isn't about me. This is about the people that are around me that help make it all happen. And so I think we learn a lot. One of the reasons I always ask that question, Tony, is that as the person in the conversation with you, but also for everyone who's listening, to have a perspective, where's this person coming from, right? And so you talked about some of your core principles right from the start. When I didn't ask you the question, tell me about your principles, I asked you, tell me about your journey, and you told us the principles.
Well, early on, I realized that average intelligence, work hard, lead people, could get you pretty far in the business world. And when you start, you said it earlier, when you start thinking you have to be the smartest person in the world, our company would have been in great danger if I was the smartest guy in the world.
Well, yeah, first of all, that's a darned high bar. And
yeah, especially the people I work with who were really smart and knew their stuff. And that's the other thing I learned early on is I couldn't be an expert in everything. That's why you have other department heads, and that's why you have people in R&D and innovation and other areas. But if you try to be, I call it, you're picking the weeds out of the railroad tracks, and here comes the locomotive. Call it Google, right? Call it social media in my world, right? That if you're in that level of detail, it's virtually impossible to then also be creating vision and strategy for the organization. And that was a non-conforming view in our company when I was coming up the ranks. You were supposed to know everything. And I shunned that, and luckily I had a good mentor within the company who saved me probably several times. But I realized, if you have great people, that frees you up to start thinking about the bigger issues the company is facing. And that's another learning I had over time, is if I was steeped in the details, then I couldn't also be at the strategic level.
One of the things that you talk about is and I love the phrase, and so I wanted to give you the chance to talk about this a little bit, is you talk about turning on the leadership gene in others. So what do you mean by, I love the phrase, and I think I'm in complete agreement with you, but talk to me about what you mean by that.
Well, to set it up, I think everyone has the ability to lead in some way. There's many ways you can lead. There's tons of literature on this and theories, but there's many ways you can lead. But I believe everybody inherently has that gene and is capable of, leading a discussion, leading a project, leading with passion. And I think as leaders, our job is to unleash that gene, to find out what environment and what turns people on so they could get excited. It came to me also because there's work done in the nonprofit world where people find out what young kids have a passion for. Instead of asking them what they want to be, they say, what's your passion? Because then if you can talk to them about their passion, they realize, they don't have to be a musician, right? They can work in the music field. So similarly with people, I think everyone has something. And as a leader, creating an environment where people can unleash that gene and do their best work. In summary, I think that's what a leader is supposed to do, is create an environment where people do their best work. And so that's where it comes from. It's like finding that way to turn it on so that people can do their best work on behalf of the company.
And it's so, we have to remember that part of that, first of all, there's a principle that's underneath. So I'm not talking to you because I'm talking to everyone listening. There's a principle underneath of what Tony just said that's critical, is that it starts with, and you and I agree 100%, it starts with the belief that that's possible for people. And so if you don't have that in your mindset, everything else that Tony just said doesn't matter. And the second thing is that many of those folks don't have that belief themselves. And we have to help them. Part of what we have to do is help them figure that out or believe that themselves before we can do any of the rest, providing the environment and everything else. So, I mean, I think it's just so important that people recognize that I think one of the big things for all of you listening that you can take from this conversation is the importance of the mindset that we bring to leading and how important that is before we even ever get to the skills themselves.
And because you have to realize everyone is watching your every move. The minute you become the boss,
they're watching
everything you say, how you project yourself. I call it, the higher you go, unfair and unjust expectations, but that's what you signed up for. If you recognize that, then you're very thoughtful, but everyone's watching you. And it doesn't mean everyone's a rock star in your team. It doesn't mean everyone has to be, but everyone can contribute in a certain way. And I think that's the key, is don't put everybody in a box. You know, I remember that IBM commercial, I think it was, where they got a guy in a suit in the box and it keeps getting smaller. And I use that in my mind all the time to remind myself that the box is constraining, and don't put people in a box. Let people do their own thing within certain parameters, of course, but I think there's a lot of talent in everyone, and if you can find a way to unleash that, then you've done a great job as a leader.
I agree 100%. So you've coined a phrase, and I know what the two words are, and I don't know how you say it. It looks to me like it's org agility. So talk to me what you mean.
Rolls right off your tongue, Kevin.
Org agility. It sounds like something someone from DePaul would say. That's all.
Exactly. Hey, don't hold that against me. Come on.
I'm absolutely not. So talk to us about what you mean by that, why it's important.
Well, first of all, as we both know, the world moves so fast, now. Everything is moving fast. And, you can either be, in my case, the publishing world is disrupted, or you could be a disruptor, right? You're one of the other. And what I began thinking about is, in my case, I was disrupted in publishing, but we were able to change our organization so we could continue to thrive and be prepared for the next disruption. And so many people have written about, built to last and other sustainable company things. But I think in today's world, it just dawned on me looking back that it wasn't necessarily, the strategies are great, but it was the kind of organization we built, I think, is one that you could either be a disruptor with this kind of organization, you could be disrupted and still be sustainable. And it has a number of elements. And this is, again, looking backwards. Org agility wasn't in my vernacular when I was in the firestorm, right?
Right.
But first, shared vision and mission. I said earlier, I was blessed that, we had a mission that was strong. We have the fourth estate. We are counted on every day, right? Mission was really strong. We also knew we were slow moving, highly bureaucratic, hierarchical when I took over, which was perfectly suited for what I was in, not.
So that's exactly how you would describe what your business needed to look like in 19.
Exactly. So we changed that to speed and action, right? We had to have that speed and action. Then we combined that with a leadership team that really embodied the things I've talked about, right? They rally their people. They're courageous. They're consistent. And we got that together. And then the stuff no one wants to talk about because it's a lot of hard work, accountability and alignment. And so this exceptional execution, knowing that you are measuring the right things, knowing people understand how they connect to the vision and how their goals cascade down from that. And we did that. Took a long time, but all the way to the press operator. And the accountability of holding people accountable to do good work and the right work is stuff people really don't like to talk about because it's really hard and it takes discipline. But we did that, and we shared for alignment purposes. We did town halls across all employee shifts. It was hard, 11 a quarter, but everybody saw the CEO and the department head 3 to 4 times a year, where we would talk about our successes, our failures, take the tough questions from the crowd. And what that built was and the last thing that I would say is we built a competitive, innovative company. So those attributes, when I look back, I think are attributes that whether you're in a company that's a disruptor or disrupted, if you have those attributes, I think you could take all incoming and you can adjust, because obviously, org agility, my definition is the ability to implement ideas quickly and pivot frequently. And those attributes that I described, I think looking back, are the kinds of attributes that, as I advise companies, those are attributes you should work at, because I think it prepares you for the unknown, which is the world we're living in. You really don't know when you're going to be disrupted, because there's so many people out there working on new ways to disrupt you.
Exactly. So we're going to shift gears, everybody, and move to the fast break, which Tony told me he actually likes, which means came prepared. So anyway, the fast break is brought to you by our process for helping leaders develop over their lifetime to become the leaders they were born to be. We call it the Remarkable Way. And if you want to learn more, you can get signed up for the next release by going to remarkablepodcast.com/way, W-A-Y. So the fast break, for those of you uninitiated, is I have 3 words. I have 3 ideas, actually. I have these prepared before we start. Tony does not know what they are. As it turns out today, 2 of them, he mentioned these words, but didn't talk much about them. So I'm good with the words. And so if you're ready, Tony, I'm ready to share them with you, for you to share your thoughts, your whatever you want to say about these 3 words, after 3 ideas. First one is authenticity.
Critically important as a leader that you are who you are. And just because you have a title, you don't change who you are. You change how you act, perhaps. You change. You have to add skills to your toolbox. But being authentic and meaning what you say and saying what you mean, I think are critical, even though everyone will want to put you in a box. They will want you to lead a certain way, act a certain way. And I believe you have more people willing to follow you when you give heartfelt comments around having to lay off employees, not scrubbed comments. I mean, it's heartfelt.
Right.
And being excited when you win, thanking people in an authentic manner. Those little interactions spread throughout the organization more than any memo or any proclamation. And so I think you have to modify them different from my experiences, because you want to be relevant and current. But being authentic and real, I think, is critical, because you'll have more people follow you because they believe you.
They're following you, and it starts with that, right? So the second word is planning.
Planning. I am an anal planner.
Well, see, I have figured that. I didn't know that when I wrote this, but I have figured that out from the very first moment of us starting to chat before I hit record. So say a little bit more about planning.
So I love Dawes, the rock band. I call him a leadership expert. I'm kidding, of course. But it says, if you don't know where you're going, all roads will lead you there. And I don't know how many meetings I had to sit in early in my career where we didn't know what the goal was. And I just think a simple way to describe planning. It's setting goals, building strategies, key initiatives, and metrics. You can talk about 8,000 things, but to me, having a simple planning framework so that everyone understands the goals. That's a novel thought. Understands the thought or the goals and how we're going to get there. So planning to me is critical to success, whether you're planning your career, you're planning your budget at home, you're looking out for a company or a department. The ability to tell people where we're going and follow that up with really concrete plans and strategies. And the last thing I'll say around planning is the dirty little secret of using broad strategies. You know, people like to be real specific, and I like to have broad strategies. And the reason is then all the people in the organization can contribute.
And they can see how what they do does contribute, right?
And they can come up with new ideas that the senior guys haven't thought of by doing that. So there's a lot. I could talk, as you know already, you and I could talk about this probably for a half a day, but I think it's really important, and I don't think it needs to be 50 pages, requiring a PhD to understand. I think it should actually be simple enough that all employees can understand the plan, and they can all figure out ways they can contribute.
Cool. Third word, different approach, different area here. Work-life balance.
I've written an article about this, and I will non-conform again. So I don't call it work-life balance. I call it harmony. And it's not to be cute. It's actually, I think it's, I use the pendulum, Kevin, okay? And I think about being ready in the moment to decide where the pendulum goes. So we all know there are times like when I took over as CEO, it was all work. You know, I talked to my wife, I'm like, oh my gosh, first time CEO, told her what was going on. Pendulum to work.
Yep.
Sick child. Bam.
Yep.
Basketball games. Bam. Plays at school. Bam, the family. But harmony occurs, I think, when you go into it understanding what's important to you at the moment and knowing that work will always swing the pendulum towards work if you let it. But
You own the pendulum.
Harmonize.
You own the pendulum.
You own the pendulum. Might mean you're the first one in the office. Might be the first one that leaves the office, but is doing work after the event at 7 or 8 at night. But you control your pendulum and your time from when you wake up to when you go to bed. And putting you in a box, that means you need to be the last person out of the office, even though your kids have a really important thing or your spouse is ill or has a doctor's appointment. To me, is not being a leader. A leader makes tough choices. And so I don't use balance, I use harmony, and I use this pendulum because, and communicating with your spouse and or family, right, about what's going on is a key part of that. So they understand, hey, dad's kind of absent here for a little while, but hey, he's gonna come back when we need him. And I'm involved in a lot of not-for-profits. I just want to put this out here because I think it's about harmony and believe in the strength of families and the powerful influence fathers and mothers have on their children, and take that seriously. And you can be both. You could be a hard-charging executive that has some success, and you can also be a good husband, father, son, grandpa, because I'm a grandpa. I got my best title ever. I have 2 grandchildren, so I had to throw that in. Sorry.
That's all right.
But I think it all fits into your question, your word, that it is a challenge to find the right balance. But think about it more as harmony versus having to pick. Have it all.
So, since we're talking about harmony, and since it's not all about work, what do you do, Tony, for fun?
I'm enjoying my new title of grandfather tremendously. So that's moved up to number one. As we talked, I'm a sports fan, and so I like watching my favorite teams from Chicago. And
everybody, in case you're wondering, he's a Cubs fan. I already said that.
Yeah, you can say that, Kevin.
And it's not just because he worked for the Tribune Company. He told me he grew up a Cubs fan. It's
yes.
Media, though, right? It is because of media.
It is because we could watch games on WGN, Kevin. And then last, I like fitness and activities, outside activities. And so I try to find my way to the fitness room every once in a while to stay in good shape so that I can stay relevant and current.
There you go. And my second to last question for you is about reading. What are you reading now? What's something you've read recently, Tony, that people might find interesting or valuable? I'm
starting Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life. My son has been listening to him, and I just started it. I've been watching some of his podcasts, but I like his approach of mental, spiritually, and physical alignment, and the importance men play in the lives of others, not just men, but his focus is on it. And my son, big fan, turned me on to that. And as I told you, I read my daily Stoic journal every morning to remind myself of staying in the right place and in the right mindset.
Perfect. And the last question for you is, okay, people have enjoyed listening to you and learned from your wisdom and experience. How can they learn more about you, find out about your work, etc.?
Well, I'm posting some articles on Medium. The Ascent has published a number of those. I'm on LinkedIn, and beginning to speak. I did some speaking up in Toronto at Future Fest to talk about leading through disruption. And so, people can find some of my content, and if they enjoy that content and read some more, pass it along to their colleagues and friends. And again, my goal now is to do as much as I can to help the emerging leaders find their way, because I've been blessed to have been helped along the way by so many people.
Perfect. So everybody, now I have a question for all of you who are listening and or watching, and that is now what action are you going to take from what you heard today? Whether it was some of the thoughts that Tony just shared about harmony, or some of the ideas that he gave you about planning, or whether you go all the way back to some of the stuff we talked earlier about organizational agility and everything else. The challenge for you is not just to have listened to us, but to say, what can I take from this 30 plus minutes that will help me be a more effective leader for the folks that I'm around? So I challenge you to do that sort of before you move on to whatever your next thing is. And so, Tony, thanks so much for being here. It was a pleasure. I knew from the minute we started chatting before I hit record that it was going to be fun, and it was. And so thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that.
So for all of you, before I go, we would love to have you join this conversation, find out what's going on, and have a hand in how this podcast continues to evolve. Even suggest who we might want to have on. And you can do that by joining our Facebook group. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook to find out how. And speaking of remarkablepodcast.com, that's where you can find all of our past episodes. So whether you're listening or watching from your favorite app, or you want to go there to see the show notes and get links to the things we do, remarkablepodcast.com, to support what we're doing here every single week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.